Hello, I'm David Malone of Golem XIV blog, and I thought I would try finally a video blog. If this works, I might try it again, so please do let me know if you think it's any good. This time I thought what I would talk about is banks. Let's start with HELOCs. Believe it or not, HELOCs, home equity loans, are back in favour in America. The most recent figures I've found is that HELOCs are 20% up on just last year, which makes 15% of all home loans originated HELOCs. Now, that means people are taking equity back out of their house. So the recent reignition of a housing bubble, such as it is, means people are looking at the value of the house going, oh, look, our house is worth more. And they're taking that money out. That's what the rise in HELOCs means. But that's not money they earned. That's money they now owe to a bank. Add to that student loans. There's now $1.2 trillion worth of student loans. And latest figures again is that nearly 35% of all those HELOC loans that were given to people under 30 are now 90 days delinquent. And being under 30, what that means is it's the recent ones, the people who are taking out loans most recently. So a third of them of those loans are already delinquent. Great. And then you can add in $924 billion worth of auto loans, and a third of those are subprime. All of that is on the bank's books, or they've securitized it on someone else's books. Now, I don't think it takes a genius to see that it's not going to take much of a downturn for the bottom to drop out of the housing market, putting those HELOCs underwater, and the people who took them out finding that their value of their house has suddenly evaporated again, but the money they borrowed against it, they now owe. If a third of student loans are already 90 days delinquent, and we're supposedly in the middle of a recovery, then what's going to happen when people can't get those muck jobs anymore? Because although America's official unemployment rate has been going down, it hasn't gone down a lot, and those are the increase in jobs month after month. When you look at the figures, these are not great jobs. These are part-time and temporary jobs. Those are the jobs that people coming out with a huge student loan are managing to get. No wonder they're delinquent. And then you've got a third of auto loans being subprime. Great. How about outside of America? Well, banks here are just fabulous in Europe. RBS has now lost all of the £46 billion that the taxpayer was forced to put into it. It's all gone. They've already made that many losses. I think every year they've clocked up a loss, and they're not finished yet. And then we come to Espírito Santo Bank in Portugal. I love this one. They recently went bankrupt, but after having passed the most recent ECB stress test. Fantastic, huh? Yep. The ECB tested all the European banks, and if I can just find it, I'll tell you, yeah, this is what they tested them for. They tested in their adverse scenario, which means this. It meant they imagined an increase in global bond yields, amplified by an abrupt reversal in risk assessment, i.e. that people were no longer wanting to buy risky assets, further deterioration in credit quality. I don't know how much lower it can get. Never mind, okay. Stalling policy reforms jeopardizing confidence and sustainability of public finances. In other words, that people in Europe might finally say, no more austerity, we're not having this. So that's a worry, obviously. And a lack of necessary bank balance sheet repair. Well, there's a lot of that going around. So that's what they're testing them for. And Banco Espirito Santo passed and then promptly went bankrupt. Now, I'm sorry, but you've got to ask the question, who was it in the ECB and what level of financial genius did they bring to bear when they looked at all of the information that Espirito Santo gave them, which is no less than they're giving the bank ECB now. In other words, this is as much information as we're going to get. And they tested it all and they decided it was fine, and then it's not. And then just now, just a couple of days ago, we found that not only Espirito Santo, but the entire Espirito Santo group has now gone bankrupt. Because the Espirito Santo group is a whole big group of financial institutions and others, and their own pet bank. And what we find out is that the Espirito Santo Bank, before it went down, was busy giving loans to the other parts of the Espirito Santo group. And in order to do that, were selling their own debt and the debt of those other parts of the Espirito Santo group to the bank's clients. Often retail clients, without those retail clients really knowing what the heck they were buying. Now, I can't say that that's fraud, because someone would serve me with a lawsuit. However, it's not far away. And what we have then is a whole group of companies who couldn't get a loan other than from their own pet bank. That pet bank is given the most serious scrutiny by the European Central Bank and declared to be fine, and then it's not. Which, I'm sorry, if we were talking about people who tested cars, and they tested a whole range of cars, and one in particular, they said, oh, this car's fine. And then just after the test was finished, we found that, in fact, the car was a death trap, that the brakes didn't work, the seat belts were frozen, and the engine fell out. I'm sorry, why are we saying to ourselves, oh, well, the ECB is going to test the banks, so presumably it'll be fine. And Espirito Santo passed that test, and let me see, but with capital ratios, in other words, how much capital they have in the bank to underpin their great, wonderful book of loans, of between 5 and 6, which is less than it should be. The sad part is that Espirito Santo wasn't the only bank like that. There were 15 others that passed in the same rather pathetic way that Espirito Santo did, but passed. 2 more in Greece, and 1 in Cyprus, 2 in Germany, Banco Popolare in Italy, and, oh God, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 more in Spain. So presumably, if the ECB did bang up a job assessing them as they did Espirito Santo, then it's going to be great. And one of the things that's really concerning is that the Spanish, Italian and Greek authorities twisted the ECB's arm. I don't know how hard they had to twist it. Maybe the ECB was all in favour of it. But they've allowed the banks in those countries to count tax credits as part of the regulatory capital. In other words, they don't have this money. They're just owed money in the term of tax credits for having made losses in previous years by their sovereign nation. So part of what makes them robust and wonderful banks is that the sovereign, in this case Greece, Spain and Italy, owe them money. So wait a minute, just let me get this right. In a downturn, we don't have to worry about those banks because 1, the ECB has said they're fine, like they did with Espirito Santo, and 2, if there's any trouble, they're owed lots of money by solvent places like Greece. What could go wrong? It's just genius. And you might think to yourself, well, okay, things are dodgy, but there's not going to be a problem, is there? I mean, if there's going to be a downturn, we'll need a trigger. And what could possibly happen? Well, how about things like China deciding that because their own coal producers are largely insolvent, that they're going to stick a 3 to 6% levy on coal imports. And their main supplier is Australia. And Australia really relies hugely on the export of things like iron and coal. And they're now going to have a 3 to 6% levy put on that export. if that levy creates a real dent in Australia's exports, and Australia has a huge housing bubble. I'll tell you, I think Australian houses, if I can find it, here you go. Yeah, they're expecting home prices to rise in Sydney from between 8 and 12% next year. And that's what they're relying on. I don't think that's going to work if the Chinese have just stuck a large import tariff on Australian coal. So I don't think our banks are in any great shape. I don't think anything much has been fixed. And the only thing they can point to say that has been fixed is the stock market. That's gone up. Well, most of us don't own anything from the stock market. It's owned by the overclass. And sure, they are up from 2009. However, they've been dropping like a stone for the last 3 months. In some cases, they've wiped out all of 2014's gains already, which means that I think we're going to see a major intervention by the ECB and the Fed. All this talk of tapering, all the rest, they may carry out those things, but they're going to have to do something huge. The ECB's already said it may put in up to 1.2 trillion, I think, euros. I think we're going to have to see the Fed doing the same. All is not well in Bankland. Thanks for listening. Bye.